Okay, I have 11 o'clock by my time, Central Time, so I think we're ready to get started. I want to welcome you to this CNG virtual session on navigating the lifelong journey in certification. We're very excited to have our panel presenting. But I also want to, first of all, thank our sponsors and acknowledge them. Stephanie, if you could switch to the next slide. But before we do that, we have housekeeping items. Please feel free to stay on mute while you're listening. Drop any questions into the chat as we go, and we'll save time at the end, hopefully for Q&A. My name's Belinda Brenner, and I'm the chair of the virtual program committee for the Certification Networking Group. So again, I want to welcome you to this session on behalf of the rest of the members of the committee. And as I gave a little preview before earlier, I also want to thank and welcome our sponsors. And on the next slide, we have a list of our sponsors for today's session, which is BenchPrep, Momentive, and Prometric. We also want to give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about their companies. So we'll start with BenchPrep. Ashish, you want to take it off, please?
Absolutely.
Hit it off.
Thanks a lot, Belinda, and thanks a lot for the CNG group. We are very, very, very excited to be here. My name is Ashish Rangnekar. I am the CEO and co-founder of BenchPrep. Every day, we work with associations and credentialing bodies that are shaping the workforce of tomorrow. And our role in this ecosystem is to help them grow their impact and revenue by delivering exceptional lifelong learning experiences. So this kind of conversation is a very near and dear to us, and something that we think about on a day-to-day basis. We all know that this is all about impact. That's what we are here to drive, and the scale of impact that we are able to drive continues to grow. Today, more than 750,000 learners engage with our platform every month. We collect over 1 billion minutes of learning. Each interaction is a small step towards mastery, confidence, and career growth for learners. And I highlight this because all of this data is actually kind of helping us figure out what works and what doesn't when we actually truly enable lifelong learning. But hey, we are very proud to power the digital lifelong learning experiences of some of the most reputed organizations in this space, like HRCI, ISACA, GARP, PMI, and many others who are truly leading the way in professional learning and certification. And after doing this for almost a decade now, the takeaway is very clear to us that lifelong learning is no longer a buzzword or just a member benefit. It is an economic necessity, and for our customers, a truly strategic growth opportunity. And that's what we focus on. Now, one of the defining strengths of our platform is its ability to enable the entire lifelong learning journey. Because if you think from a learner's perspective, or a member or a professional, whatever nomenclature we use, for them, learning isn't a straight line. It's this continuous cycle of learn, practice, certify, move on to the next skill, learn, practice, certify, and so on and so forth. So we have built all of these capabilities to support not just kind of the point in time learning, but the entire cycle seamlessly, so that we can help our customers drive measurable outcomes and business impact. This year, we are on track to generate more than 200 million in revenue for our customers through these programs. So that's the level of scale that this can drive. And our customers are not just users of our technology. They are truly strategic partners. And for many of them, BenchPrep is the operating system that powers their entire lifelong learning enterprise. So that's why it's both a privilege and a responsibility, one that we carry with deep respect and purpose. And on that note, we are really excited to be talking about lifelong learning in this forum. So thanks, Belinda.
Thank you, Ashish. Now we'll turn to Chris Capistan from Momentive.
Thanks, Belinda. Looks like Stephanie really Googled my PowerPoint slides there. But so I'm Chris Capistrand. You guys may have seen me before and maybe wondering who's Momentive. So Cobalt, who everyone has known for years in the certification space, was recently acquired in May by Momentive Software. Momentive Software is a larger company that serves associations, nonprofits, and certification organizations. So we have several AMS solutions, event management, learning management, a whole gamut of solutions around nonprofits, associations, and certification groups. Cobalt is now part of that portfolio. With our traditional association management software, we have also rebranded the Cobalt certification software to certification management powered by Momentive. It's the same product today. We actually just came out with a new release. Very excited about that. Very excited to be part of the Momentive family. As many of you may know, for 27 years, we were Cobalt. We're about a 40-person company. Now, as part of the larger Momentive family, we have access to significantly larger R&D resources and are really going to be pushing product enhancements, and certification is one of our strategic initiatives. And I sort of highlighted some things here. We're pushing Path, which is our LMS platform, combined together with the certification management solution to really offer that all-in-one solution to the certification industry. I also highlighted our careers software here because we have many credentialing groups that use our career software as a way to not only help the industry in terms of job board functionality and career promotion, but also in terms of a revenue driver for our customers. It's really a win-win-win for our customers, their industry, as well as Momentive. So definitely be excited to talk more about that. I will assure you we are still the same trusted partner we have been for 27 plus years. Still tight relationships in the industry. I'm one of the CNG board members, and we are very active with ICE and also have deep integrations with many industry partners. So that will continue. Same great team, same great service that we've always offered to everybody, and very excited to tell you guys more about Momentive. If you're going to be at ICE, Momentive is a platinum sponsor, and we will be there with a booth. We're also sponsoring one of the happy hours, so definitely come by. I will be there. Come by and see us, and we'll catch up. That is it for us.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have Patrick Staley or anyone else from Prometric on the call? It didn't look like Patrick had joined yet. Okay, why don't we move to Liz, and then we'll check back with Prometric after Liz Dombrowski from the Institute of Credentialing Excellence tells us about what's going on with ICE.
All right, well, good morning. Well, I guess good afternoon for folks. Like Chris was saying, we're getting ready for the exchange. We'll be in Phoenix in November. So if you are still thinking about registering, I do encourage you to do so. Good news is that we are getting an overflow hotel. Suffice to say, the hotel is 100% sold out. So we're working on an overflow hotel that should be coming up here in a couple days. We also have opened up additional registrations for pre-cons of the Future of Credentialing Summit since those were at capacity earlier. So all wonderful problems to have. So you can come see Chris and a lot of other vendor partners and myself, and Manira on my team is here as well. And in case that wasn't enough, we have a bunch of webinars coming up between now and then listed there. So hope you can join us for some education and some networking.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz. It doesn't look like Patrick has been able to join the call yet. So we're going to move on to the educational session and maybe check back with
Yeah, I
Prometric
did get a
later.
note from them, Belinda. They were having some challenges getting on the meeting. I'm trying to frantically
Okay.
work behind the scenes here. Our system seems to be sending out conflicting links. So I just see Kim just joined. So
Okay. Okay.
you want to go back
Oh,
to them,
great.
and I'm going to send another update out to the rest of the attendees to make sure there seems
Yeah.
to be some confusion here. So apologies for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris, so much. Kim, we're so glad you're able to join. I understand Patrick hasn't joined yet. So would you like to present the Prometric sponsor section? Section?
Give me 1 second. I just want to check. I just sent him the new link.
Okay.
He's joining right now. I see him popping in.
Okay.
Hey, Kim, I'm here.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. So I'm so glad about that. Apologies for the technical issues. So we'll let you take it away and tell us all about Prometric.
Belinda, thank you. So yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about where we are today, how we look to evolve and where we want to go in the future too. But my name is Patrick Staley. I'm the Vice President of Global Client Advocacy. So Kim takes care of me. He's one of our kind of tier one platinum enterprise directors. But again, I just wanted to share a little background too. Love the theme, love the title for today, Navigating the Lifelong Journey. Prior to Prometric, I was operating and working in the education sector for 10 15 years, I want to say, across different modalities. So excited to connect today and just kind of share about our vision, how it's adapting and reflecting the changing world too, and that lifelong journey. So Kim, anything to add?
Nope.
All right. Usually she has to steer me in the right way. So again, where we're at today, 180 countries, 1,500 cities, over 8,400 locations across rapidly changing modalities, as you might expect, in-center remote, paper-based, computer-based, really expanding and continuing to expand that footprint, working side by side with our partners to see where they need to be, right? As talent emerges, as talent evolves, we'll be there to make sure that we're gathering them and connecting them as well too. So how we look at that in terms of, what does that really mean in terms of the impact for our partners and ultimately for the candidates themselves, right? Like myself, Kim, and our teams are really focused on that partner relationship, but ultimately it's about that candidate experience. So looking at over 25 million hours of exams delivered across 7 million exams for more than 400 candidate or clients that we have across the world, and looking at both partner satisfaction and candidate satisfaction. So high rates across both, not just in terms of the overall experience, but also with the different modalities that they're interacting with, right? Like from scheduling and beyond. And essentially 99.5% system uptime, over 3,000, almost 3,000 employees worldwide, looking at the tech, looking at the teams that we have in place to support this. So this is, again, like that footprint, our operations today. And now we'll talk a little bit about how that's beginning to evolve. So as we look at it from a mission, vision, and values point of view, we wanted to move beyond just the notion of, we're developing certification, we're developing examinations. We wanted that mission to reflect our global view and also that of our partners as well. So our mission, building the workforce of tomorrow, the vision to play a transformational role for people, communities, and the global economy. And a few of those values, we need the values reflected, what's driving us, not just internally, but face to face in the experience that we have with our partners and ultimately with candidates, championing human potential, right? That's that focus on workforce of tomorrow. But also, if we think about it from a lifelong journey point of view, really developing the tools and the teams to support that. So the why is really important behind it, right? We have an obligation, one, directly to our partners, right? As the world transforms, right? As we look at the people, the communities, and the economies, we want to make sure that our mission and vision is matching not just what they have, but also the communities, the people that they're trying to serve. And this last bullet point here is the one that I really like to focus on. As we look at our new mission and vision, and again, like I said, moving beyond just assessment and examination development, we have a greater purpose now really defined in our mission because our partners are not developing certifications. they're protecting health, they're safeguarding markets, they're upholding integrity, they're advancing law and justice. So we wanted to make sure that we were in lockstep with them side by side to make sure that we had our mission and vision reflect theirs as well. Whoever's doing the slide transition, fantastic transitions. I don't have to say next. I hate saying that. I hate saying next. Wonder if that's you. More power to it. I love it. So selfishly, I wanted to brag a little bit about the team. Great job, Stephanie. Brag a little bit about the team, because how does this actually play out, right? We have to connect this high level mission and vision. We do that with the values, but we also have to do it in our day-to-day operations and interaction. Now, I've got the benefit of really leading alongside our client experience team and our senior vice president for global advocacy to move from a standard client success model, which was really successful, but to say we have to do more to transform, to respond, and really escalate the needs of our clients internally so that we're operating as a global team, so that we're not operating in silos. And this is an initiative that's been underway. And I think we're already seeing the effects of that play out with some of our biggest partners. Now, the why is on the next slide. So that was the only time I've had to say next. That's it. The why is essential. This is the what, right? How our teams are moving. The why is because this industry is fantastically complex and technical and operational, and there are so many different teams that you can operate. And this is true for Prometric, all of the other partners that are out there in the space. But really for us, it begins with partnership. It begins with solution design to make sure that examination, certifications, yes, the preparation for that, the educational experiences, both pre and continued after that, are really tailored uniquely, not just to our client needs, but that workforce development need as well. And then essentially, how are we working as a single team to implement, to deliver, and to support those ongoing operations, and then continuously reviewing that cycle, right? Meeting with our teams to make sure that it's up to date. Flawless transition now. And now I want to share, like, again, how do we want to continue to evolve now, especially as it relates to the learning element of it too. And theme today is expanding our footprint across education. Yes, standard K-12 models, but also university and beyond, and really thinking about it from a learning experiences model. We're doing that with our with EdPower, now known as Prometric Pathways, and really fine tune, right? As we think about AI, because we're always talking AI, it's got to be it's got to be a part of it. I'm still a little skeptical. What I'm not skeptical about is from an industry perspective, how we can use it to be more efficient, how that translates to AI powered certification and content. There's no better example than Find to Generate. And we know that not just because we're biased, we are, but also looking at the fact that it's the first US patent for AI powered assessment technology, right? Empowering your teams to go beyond this, not just in the examinations, but in terms of the content that we can use AI to develop and really hold it up to that standard that we set from a psychometrics point of view and from a data scientist point of view. So fine tune, generate, and the first patent is certainly one. And the next one is really looking at what else we can develop, making sure that we are on that edge of innovation. You don't want to be too far ahead, right? Because then you're just out in the world developing some crazy things that may or may not come to fruition. But in terms of that human skill development, creating different modalities, different worlds within you can operate. So that takes a place of avatar technology, virtual reality. A lot of what we're developing, even within outside of partnering with Mersion, but looking at boosts that we use a lot for examination preparation and the information beyond it, is trying to capture not just you're doing test prep, but you're creating, if you look at it from the ontological fidelity point of view, you're creating real world experiences. So how can we use technology to capture human emotion, to capture the feeling of if you're working in HR, in finance, and you're sitting across from a client, what is that interaction really going to feel like? So again, it's taking, being on the edge of innovation means that you're not only developing the technology that's innovative, but you're doing it through that human element as well. And that's what I'm excited about Prometric, not just to partner with our candidates, but also see what our test development teams are working on, how we continue to innovate. So we wanted to share a little bit about how we're evolving, not just as an organization, but also developing the technology and resources to support our clients and our candidates as well. Did I keep it under 5 minutes? Did we do it in under 5? Maybe a little over.
Maybe
Maybe a little over.
little.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good for me. That's good for me. But thank you all so much.
Thanks very much, Patrick. I noticed that a number of people have joined now, so I want to thank you for joining, and apologies for any technical issues you encountered. But now I'm very excited to turn it over to my CNG committee co-member, Lori Goebbels-Reese, who's going to introduce our panelists and our educational topic for today. Lori?
Thank you, Belinda. Hello, everyone. My name is Lori, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. But before we dive in, I just want to outline the format of today's session. This is a chance for all of us to engage in an open and honest conversation about lifelong learning and certification. I want to encourage everyone to participate, ask questions in the chat anytime, and we'll be sure to bring them into our dialogue. We'll also be using poll questions after each panelist speaks, so you'll get to weigh in and see how your perspectives align with each other. So I want to make sure that we keep things interactive, supportive, and candid. Everyone's experience here is valuable, whether you're a seasoned leader or new to the field. So I just want to set the tone for our session today. With that, I'm honored to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Ashish. He is the CEO and co-founder of BenchPrep, who we saw earlier. And then next up is Tracy. She is the Chief Learning Officer for Casbo. And then finally, we have Jasmine Roquette, the Director of Intelios POCA Certification Academy. Each brings unique experience and forward-thinking perspectives to the conversation. So I'm going to start with Ashish. Can you tell us how you've navigated the concept of lifelong learning throughout your professional career?
Absolutely, Rory. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to be part of this specific conversation, and we're going to talk a lot about the business or the framework side of lifelong learning in a second, but I wanted to kind of start with something a little bit more personal as to what lifelong learning has meant for me personally throughout my professional journey. And it's clear to me that, I mean, lifelong learning is not just a corporate value or a business strategy. It truly has been a thread that has shaped every stage of my career. And I'm sure as Jasmine and Tracy share more, it's going to be clear that this is the theme of everyone's career in some form and shape. Now, I began my journey in mechanical engineering, unbelievable. And I was fascinated by how things work, the mechanics, the precision, the systems thinking. But as I went deeper, I found myself increasingly drawn to the analytical side of things, the math, the logic, the problem solving, and so on. So I made my first big pivot early on, and I moved from mechanical engineering to pursue my master's in applied mathematics. And that decision, I mean, I didn't even know the word lifelong learning back then, but that decision, which was driven purely by curiosity, taught me that learning doesn't have to follow a straight line. It can evolve as your interest evolves. So that was grad school. And then I moved into the world of business, and I took up a job in corporate strategy, which turned out to be a whole new classroom, essentially. I had to unlearn a lot of the applied mathematics concepts. And now it wasn't about equations anymore. It was about people and incentives and market and change. And most of what I learned came not from college courses, but from certificate programs and projects and the mistakes that I made and the reflection that I had to kind of go through. And then came a turning point where I decided to pursue my MBA. And like everyone else, that meant taking the GMAT exam. And the prep experience for that was pretty bad. It was outdated tools, rigid systems, an approach that didn't really fit my lifestyle or how modern learners learn. So instead of complaining about it, which I did enough actually, I decided to act on it actually. And we ended up building the first assessment engine and the first test prep app for iPhone ever. And that's where the bench prep journey began. It started off as an experiment. I was not sitting there trying to kind of build a company. But that small experiment, which was again driven by just desire for lifelong learning, grew into something much larger, a mission that making learning more engaging, continuous, and human, which we actually work on today. Then later I joined Chicago Booth for my MBA, and that experience helped me put all of this together, right? Technology, business, learning into something more scalable and impactful. So when I talk about lifelong learning, I'm not just narrating a theory, I'm narrating my own journey and what I have seen work in our community through our customers over the last decade. And specifically, what I've seen in the last decade is I've watched several certification and credentialing organizations evolve from once a year exam providers into year-round learning ecosystems. And the most successful ones are ones that have embraced the same principles that we have been talking about, or we are going to talk about, the supporting learners before and during and after certification, using data to drive continuous improvement, seeing learning not as a transaction, but a relationship. The most successful organizations have fully embraced it as part of their culture, not just product strategy. And that's why, Laurie, today's conversation matters so much. We're not just managing credentials, we're helping people stay relevant in a world that is changing faster than ever before. And I'm also very excited about hearing from Tracy and Jasmine, who each bring very deep experience and perspective to this conversation. I remember we were kind of talking about just preparing for this, and very quickly we realized that we represent different paths through the same landscape, all driven by curiosity, purpose, and a shared belief in the power of lifelong learning. So let's jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to enter the poll question in the chat for everyone to respond to, but I'm interested to hear from Jasmine and Tracy if you have anything you'd like to add or any reactions to Ashish's experiences. Jasmine or Tracy? Conversation.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience. A couple of things that really stood out to me is the idea of staying relevant. As you said, the landscape is changing. Newer generations are coming into the workforce, how they're learning, how they're staying proficient, the speed at which things are changing are so fast. And so being able to support that full journey of a user is definitely important. And so that definitely resonated with me.
And I would add that Ashish and I go back because of the enjoyment of figuring out how to implement technology in lifelong learning. That it's a tool and it adds value. And so that's always been the ability to reach more learners through the use of technology. And so that's something that we've had in common that aligns our lifelong learning goals as well.
Great.
And I think to Tracy's point, talking about the technology a little bit more, I feel like there's so much noise and so much chaos out in the world where people are learning, trying to upskill. And so I think as certifying organizations or trusted source with our members, like we could be a place where we could help make sense of all of that noise and that chaos going on out there. So I think being able to leverage that technology to help our users navigate how to upskill, how to get certified is an important role to play.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking in the chat now at the responses, and there's a good mix, but a lot mission driven, learner driven, revenue growth. So yeah, thank you for your perspectives. It's clear that we are all thinking about these things. So next up, I'm gonna turn it over to Tracy. What new learning initiatives or successful certificate programs have you launched? And then what has been the business impact on those?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, officially. Hi, I'm Tracy Petrillo. I've worked in the learning and certification credentialing space for a really long time. And I was one of the first people that were really harshly judged in the digital badging space many, many years ago. People thinking that, no, that's taking away. That's not going to stick. Badges are for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And it, to me, then it was always about learner recognition. And so the space that I love exploring are the fringes of what we're doing, where we have these high stakes certifications. And we have built these business models around making people achieve a very high level of learning, capability, competencies, and then demonstrate that learning. And those people that don't get to that point of demonstration are often, lose sight of what professional opportunities there are. And in many professions, there's good reason. We have to have these stakes high. We have to have these assessments. We have to have renewal and recertification. But my journey has taken me to the absolute opposite end of looking at a profession and saying, how can we create learning and recognize learning in smaller pieces and smaller chunks? And you've all heard this. This is nothing new. But over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to go to an association that really let me explore building not only the use of an LMS, but building staff and small module-based learning with recognition at the end that is not about a high stakes credential. So the micro certificate and micro certifications and certificate programs, and we all know what certification is, but I found after 2 years of speaking to our board of directors 4 times a year, they didn't care what it was called. Like, that's our industry, but just give them some learning. So really quickly, I'll give you some business model examples that have created significant revenue, that have let us grow staff and technology, but have also added member value and enhanced our mission. So our highest level certification in California is for the chief business official. This is an individual who runs all of the K through 12 schools. Every school in California. And when we talk about schools, we think about teachers and students, teachers and students. There are people that run schools, just like there are people that run cities and run governments. So the chief business official is the highest level. And we have a certification program, a high stakes exam. We use a tool. We test twice a year. So we have that. But then we were backing in, looking at, we're going to have a gap. We're going to have a lot of people retiring. We have to figure out how to backfill. We have to get people ready that aren't qualified to go into this program, the pre-program before training. We partner with a university to offer one of these programs, and we decided to create what we called a certificate program in school business finance. And it's a 20-hour program, and we worked with probably 20 to 30 subject matter experts over a very short period of time. And we created content modules, we created knowledge checks and assessments through it. And it's on our website, you can look it up, but we've just offered it in the last year. We've had 2 cohorts at a price point of about $2,000 a person. We had 132, our first cohort, 56, our second, 188 people, and we made $376,000 gross this year on a new program. We started backing that down even further, creating module programs that are microbursts of learning that are between 5 and 6 total hours. We took it all the way down to the executive assistants that serve our CBOs, because they are the people putting the stuff together and putting the school board reports together. And they have to understand the language and the legislation and the budget forms and everything. That product is $500. So wouldn't you give your staff $500 for a training? And that is a micro certificate that they're earning, that they're feeling proud about, that they're building confidence and credibility in. And in the first 2 cohorts of that, we've had 77 and 52, 129 people making another $64,000 this fiscal year. And we're churning these things out because it's building the pipeline to people who in the future need a higher level certification. And we're not turning people away. And the barrier is not too high to get these things. You know, like we have to set the ability for people to start learning as adults and build confidence. And then let's move them into our high stakes credentialing. So let me stop there. I could go on.
Can I ask, is this required by the state of California? Are these learning modules, or is it just like the board is approving the funding for this? How are you getting people to take these learnings?
Yeah, great question. The only exam in California for chief business officials is ours. So we're the provider and we have a separate entity that manages the exam. When I came on board 4 years ago, we were in discussions about having it move to a licensure, a mandatory licensure, but that wasn't solving the problem. You know, and there's somebody on here, hello, other ASBO. There are other ASBOs. That's a national organization, but states and schools are very, very different. You know, so it's very unique that has modules relative. So we are the only provider of the high stakes exam and certification and recertification reinstatement program in California. The other programs are just building blocks. They're building the team that supports the CBO, that supports the schools, and the outcome is for the children. You know, better students, better campuses, you know, better ability to use fiscal responsible funds, all of that. So yeah, and I'll put some information in. So it is not mandatory out of, you know, we're in the 800 or 900 person range, which is a lot for California. I worked for an association prior that had 115,000 individuals. You know, so I understand the industry that we're in. Some of us serve a niche and some of us serve the volume, but it all matters. You know, and getting people in and through matters. Building confidence along the way matters in feeding a funnel to a profession.
It's really interesting, especially within our organization. We're seeing we're researching price. If people are willing to pay, what are they willing to pay for this education? So that's why it intrigued me if it was required.
The price point has never been a question. I've been at this organization for 4 years and we've never had an organization say they can't find the money or, oh, it's too expensive. And that can vary, you know, by profession. I've worked at other associations, but when you're looking at different programs and products, there's a market for $500 to $2,000. You know, people will pay that out of their own pocket. We actually ask people when they apply to our CBO program, how do they plan to pay? And we have a lot of people that will pay, you know, out of their own pocket. And we all know that the legislation has passed for the 529 monies, and we have to look at the wording in the future of that if those of us that don't have registered apprenticeships and things like that, you know, the funding for that. If you're a valuable, credible organization, people will find the money to pay for a program that impacts their career.
Right. Thank you.
Lori,
Thank you. So I'm gonna put another poll question in and then turn to Ashish and Jasmine to see if you have anything to add or perspective on what Tracy was shared.
I'll add two things. One is those examples are amazing examples. And Tracy, I really appreciate you actually getting into the details of the numbers. And in our previous conversations, you have shared many examples from your previous roles that kind of resulted in the same. So, and what I loved about those examples is also the commercial mindset that this brings in. And you know, Lori, going back to the poll question that you had, the first one around what do you see as the biggest driver of organization to expand lifelong learning opportunities, and revenue growth being one of them. I remember that 6 years ago, no one said revenue growth. I mean, it was all about like mission, which actually is the right lens. But what we have seen is that revenue drives mission. And the kind of products we are talking about are driving real world outcomes. Tracy, the two examples that you gave, these are not like nice to haves. I mean, these school officials are going to use this and actually turn a huge amount of value in their schools and communities and so on. Right? So I think I have seen this kind of mindset shift towards like it just only focused on mission to be like, hey, let's actually kind of have a commercial mindset, revenue driving, and of course rooted in mission. I think if you just look around our community, there is no doubt that we are rooted in mission. That is actually never a problem. It's always becomes like, is this commercially viable or not? And if that mindset is not taken, then programs just fizzle out.
Definitely, Ashish. I think that's a great point. But I think the other thing that Tracy brought up that really resonated is it sounded like you put yourself in the shoes of the members when you talked about like the value that you added and how you brought it down to a price point where every single member type had something available to them. The other thing that resonated that you said is being able to provide a pathway to that high stakes credential. A lot of times we're focused on like this high stakes credential, and maybe that's the bread and butter at a lot of our organizations. But what is that pathway? As adult learners, like we want to know that we're going to be successful. And so when you provide these certificates with the learning opportunities where it's a phased approach where eventually I can work up to this high stakes certification, I think that is going to open the doors where it helps build that confidence where eventually they may. So as Ashish was talking about, like the revenue opportunity, it's twofold. You're going to be able to bring in revenue from those learning opportunities, but ultimately building that confidence so that they do want to take that high stakes certification as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I quickly add that the revenue that we're generating is being used to bring in more staff so we can generate more products. And we have a lot of products in our portfolio that are free. And so we're bringing in staff that generate free learning. We have free online learning. We have free member roundtables. We have staff that support them. So we're not doing more money to make more money. We're doing it to provide more free member programs and access to training and development that they don't have to pay for. They don't have to ask for. And then, the polling question is interesting that people are worried here. And I would say many of you may not have a background in business development and knowing how to develop a product and promote a product and work with marketing on launching a new product and know who your audience is for that new product. And look into that, because that is where you can really shine to grow your learning portfolio. The portfolio of professional development and certification and conferences and events and in-person and online stuff, that all falls under my purview. So I know there was a question on that as well.
I think it's most interesting with the concern about cannibalizing the higher stakes certification. I think because that might be a concern because we're in the certification world, right? It's something that I've personally had to learn because my experience, my whole career has been in the testing industry, what we call the testing industry, right? And understanding and learning about education and accepting it, I think is something that, or getting the buy-in from higher up C-suite users as well as staff, because you get in the process, building a test is building a test. This is what we do. You're not really maybe given the opportunity. If you're lucky, you're given the opportunity, but to think outwardly like that.
Yeah. Laurie, I have one comment on this. So it's amazing to see how a lot of responses are all of the above. Right? But if we take a different perspective, and I'll give an example, we all can agree that this is a long game, and our stakeholders are in this profession for a long period of time, not the 3 months that they actually kind of think about the exam. And if we actually kind of map this strategy to their journey, several opportunities would emerge, right? Which can take care of, attracting enough learners or cannibalization and so on. Right? And I'll give you an example. One of our customers is in the finance world, and they have kind of a big exam, and they kind of continue to grow. And the problem statement that they had was not, hey, how do I actually get more people to take the exam? Their point was, if people become aware of this profession, all roads would lead to this exam or this particular certification. So their approach to lifelong learning was not even around the exam. It was actually around the awareness of the profession. So they went very early and they actually created a college level credit course. So cannibalization, not a problem. Attracting enough learners, the learners already exist. So I think if you actually kind of begin to think where the gaps are in the lifelong learning journey and use these four as your kind of constraints, a lot of opportunities would emerge. But the aperture has to kind of go beyond just the exam and what happens 6 months before and after. It has to be kind of much wider, and that's the trick.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all those who have responded. It's really helpful to see the variety of perspectives across organizations, the concerns. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine. So Jasmine, tell us about your experience with how your organization focuses on supporting candidates who do not pass. What approaches have you found most effective in helping these individuals?
Thank you, Lori, and great question, and thanks for having me. My name is Jasmine Roquette. As Lori introduced earlier, I'm the director of the Intelios POCA Certification Academy. Before coming into the testing and certification space, my background is in higher education. So that lens of learning and lifelong learning, I definitely carry that. I've also had a tendency to be a disruptor in every space that I'm in. So when I was in higher education, really being able to leverage technology to be able to move that forward. And since I've been in the credentialing space, really looking at what are different ways that we can support, validate our users. And so before I jump into your question specifically on how do we support those users who fail, I really want us to kind of take and look a little bit at a bigger picture. And a lot of what Ashish and Tracy was talking about is what is our role as an industry? And really our focus is to ensure patient safety. Therefore, our focus needs to move beyond just the traditional assessment and that one time they come to take that as certification, or the 6 months before and after that Ashish was talking about. And we really need to support that entire proficiency journey of users, and understanding that the certification is just one checkpoint in that entire proficiency pathway. And that pathway that we're focusing on really needs to include the initial skill building, upskilling as technology changes, or the continuous learning throughout their career. Many of us on the call, we're really focused on, how do we support a candidate who fails their exam? And there was a lot of resources, and I'll talk about that in a moment, what we can do to support those learners. But they're just a small segment of the population that we should be supporting. And so I really challenge us to think holistically at the full user journey before when they're first stepping into this career, as they're, in college and maybe taking courses, and when they're new in their career, as they're advancing their career, what does that full learning journey look like? And how does that align with your organizational mission? Is it inclusive to all of the learners, all the learner types, and those starting new skills, those adopting to the technology, as I said, or those trying to stay current in their field? Every stage is important, and we have a role to support each of those stages. The other thing I think is that we need to look at learning models that align with that understanding. Learning models that could start with formal education, but need to be flexible enough, such as some of the micro learning or module learning coursework that Tracy was talking about, and evolve as their career changes and the technology changes within the organization. The organization I work with has an extremely long history of offering high stakes exams in a very successful model. So why would we look at doing anything differently? And about 10 years ago, we stood up a micro-credential program that was built very similar to the high stakes model. But at the time, that's what we knew and that's how we built it. But we were struggling to get the certification numbers that we had predicted. And so we kind of accidentally stepped into the learning space. We started building learning resources that were really leveraged for outreach. We were building these learnings to help bring them into our ecosystem, and hopefully they would ultimately go for our certification. These were learning resources that were free. It started with articles, webinars, some of those micro learning type of opportunities. And we started to see there was a disproportionate number of individuals that were engaging in our learning versus pursuing our formal certifications. And that gave us an opportunity to actually become learners within the organization. We're talking about lifelong learnings and really looking at our members or the communities we serve, but we as professionals in the space, we need to put our learning hats on as well. And so this data, this information that we were receiving allowed us to kind of put our learning hats on and say, like, what's going on here? And be able to look at the data and understand, like, our community was looking for learning. They weren't ready, or potentially they may never be interested in some of these formal certifications, but they were looking for learning. They were looking for micro learnings to be able to support the advances in technology that was happening in our space. And so from there, we were able to build out a library of learning resources that our community continues to engage in, and engage in a rate much more than those who are taking our formal certifications. And this moment really gave us the opportunity to build business models to allow us to really support the learning, the users. So when Lori was asking, what do we do to support the learners that don't initially pass our certifications, we are now able to offer them learning resources and pathways that can help them fill those learning gaps, so eventually they can attempt our certifications and pass them. And those learnings are some that we build internally, but we also partner with external organizations. These could be formal colleges and universities that are offering these learnings. These could be some of our partner organizations that offer conferences, and then some of the internal micro learnings and formal didactic learning opportunities that we make available and we build in-house, and really have that business model that Tracy was talking about, where we could bring revenue in. And so I really encourage all of us here on the call is look at your data. You're sitting on data that can give you insights of what is your community looking for? What are the skill gaps that they have that maybe aren't being filled within other channels, that we can build some resources to help support that. Give yourself permission to put the learning hat on and look internally of how can we shift business models, how can we dip our toe into the learning space and have a true impact on the community. The traditional models that we have, it might be scary to say, but they're not sustainable. Our community, the world is advancing at such a fast pace that we need to be able to build new models that are going to support the appetite for short-form, high-impact learning. We need to be able to build models that are going to support the holistic journey, where they're not having to jump from one place to get the education and jump somewhere else to get the certification and go somewhere else for that advanced learning. How can we create a holistic, seamless process for our users so they don't have to make all these decisions, where we can put it on a silver platter for them, and we're a trusted source for them. So I really encourage us to think outside of the box. But a lot of this is kind of theoretical. Like when you're thinking about how do I support the lifelong learning journey of our users, like really, how do you get started? And for us, as I said, we started small. We started with, what would it look like if we provided some blog articles? What would it look like if we started a webinar series? And we started to build small, and we also understood that we didn't have to do it by ourselves. So we started working with partner organizations to build that learning ecosystem as well. So don't be intimidated that how are we as an organization going to step into this lifelong learning? Know that there's partners out there, there's organizations out there that can help you build that. And then I'll kind of close that. Now for us, when candidates ask, okay, I'm unsuccessful, what is the next step? We have a library of resources that we can point them to. And so I would encourage you all to kind of build that roadmap within your teams. What could the full learning journey look like, from skill building to validation to advancing their skills? And ultimately, I think really the thing that Tracy pointed out is building that pathway of confidence. So ultimately, your community that you serve, they do want to take those high stakes certification if that's ultimately your goal.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, it's intimidating. I don't know what type of audience members we have coming from a high stakes certification organization. It can be hard to wrap your head around education and needs. So it's interesting to hear your perspective. I'm going to enter the next poll question, but then I'm also going to turn it to Ashish and Tracy to see if you have anything to add regarding what you do with people who don't pass, or just any resources that you've seen, organizations you support or that you work for support the candidates.
I love this topic because I don't think the organizations that I've worked with and for and departments that I've led have done a good enough job in figuring out how can we support learners that don't pass standardized exams or assessments. And I say to myself, what if I took an hour a month, to figure out something, better outreach, connecting them to one another, things like that, because it is career and life altering in many professions if someone does not and cannot pass. There are adults that are truly identified late in life with inability to process high stakes exams, that we spend a lot of time and theory and research writing. And so it's something that really I'd love to start a conversation with more people around, because I raise my hand first to say, I don't think I've done a good job in myself and leading others into saying, what could we do? Because like Jasmine said, it's a checkbox. You do a training or an educational requirement to qualify for your assessment exam. They take the exam. If you pass, you go into this pathway now that we serve. We serve the people who pass. We serve the people that renew. We don't really serve the people that don't pass unless they come back in the door, that we say, now you're qualified to retest again. And what's that loop down there that somebody, may have paid for extensive education that can't get through? That's the door that we've created. That's the barrier that we've created. So what if we looked at that in a different way? And maybe it pivots over to more of a learning side than a certification side, but it's better. Let's get people toward their profession. Let's get people trained in ways that they're more confident to take an exam if the exam is absolutely necessary. So I'd love to continue this conversation beyond this meeting. If any of you will be in Arizona, I live in Arizona, so I'd love to say hello if you're at the pre-con for ICE as well.
I would second that. I mean, this is a really, really important question. And Laurie, I'm glad that we went there. Because I almost feel what organizations do with the learners or candidates who don't pass is what defines their commitment to lifelong learning. So either your mission is like, okay, this exam, or the mission is to kind of support the profession in a more holistic way, which includes people who were not successful in their first attempt or initially. And there are three things that I would highlight within this regard. So the first is, I think organizations need to first acknowledge why this might be happening. And one of the challenges might just be more around testing anxiety than competency. So leave competency aside, because I think that's the part where we have amazing professionals looking at the validity of the exams and and making sure that the right people go through. but there is a level of kind of confidence and anxiety and kind of, just the test taking kind of situation around it. And organizations can do a lot to take care of that. And I think this is where credentialing bodies are doing more to support in terms of practice or, simulations and stuff. So I've seen kind of that to be one approach. But even after that, you would see that someone doesn't pass an exam. We see that as a critical learning moment. And there are two approaches I have seen work very well. And I mean, I won't take all credit for it. We have actually seen our customers kind of really lean in and figure this out. So one approach is saying, okay, someone didn't pass, rather than kind of, leaving them alone, let's actually help them figure out what their personalized remediation is going to be. So we have a customer who actually delivers adaptive practice and personalized feedback after exam attempts, so that the learner or the candidate can actually look at what their weaknesses are and actually spend time focused on that, rather than kind of going back to square one and kind of restarting the journey. And what this results in is like, hey, they feel, more support from the credentialing body. They have higher confidence and a higher probability of re-engagement. So that's one. Second, and this is going to be a contrarian view a little bit. Right? There is a situation where, let's say someone doesn't pass, and maybe that's not the path for them. And that's okay too. That the only path cannot be passing the exam. And maybe for some licensing situation, that's the path. But for many other situations, that's not the path. So in another example, we are helping someone create alternate pathways to help learners or candidates play to their strengths. Right? You thought this is the path. You took a shot at it. Maybe it didn't work. It wasn't about confidence. It wasn't about remediation. Maybe it's a competency issue, which is okay. But hey, given your strength, here are the 4 other pathways that are available to you. And again, I mean, as soon as you kind of change from, hey, our mission is to kind of deliver a very robust and rigid or rigorous exam, to how do we actually support lifelong learning, everything changes. And these are just kind of a couple of examples of those.
And I think to kind of build on a little bit what Ashish was saying is, if we get out of the mindset of being transactional, of, okay, I'm delivering this certification, and build a more relational business model, then you become curious and you want to get into and understand why they didn't pass, why, what the challenges that they're having. And then the option or the opportunity that Ashish shared, where they were like, maybe there's alternative pathways, or being able to deliver feedback of, this is why you didn't pass, and here's a different pathway. But being able to understand why, and a lot of us are sitting on this information. We see that individuals aren't passing. Can we dig into the information and understand why? Can we get into the data? So I think it's putting that curious cap on and understanding why, and that can lead into developing learning pathways and opportunities that can either support them if you still want to keep that traditional path, or be able to give them an alternative pathway to get to that ultimate goal.
I think with that, even looking like, why aren't the people passing? Thinking it's not just the psychometrics, right? It's not just, oh, there's bad items. It's looking deeper into that. So it's an interesting point. A lot of interesting feedback in the chat too regarding the question. Mixed opportunities, but I do see a lot that are thinking that if people don't pass, to offer all of the above. The structured feedback, study, resources, etc. It's just, how do we build it? How do we get the budget? But then again, that brings the point that Tracy brought, is business development, and Jasmine just meeting with other providers and things like that. When there's a will, there's a way, kind of thing. So thank you for that. And then I just want, I'm looking at the time, we have about 30 minutes left. So I want to shift gears now, because part of why we're here is to go beyond just the success stories. And we're talking openly about our real challenges in our field. I've got a few challenging questions for our panel, but I truly want to hear from all of you as well. Please feel free to put tough or thought-provoking questions in the chat, speak up, or raise your hand. I'm going to give out my first question. So how does your organization balance the drive for credentialing revenue with providing reasonable learning opportunities for all candidates? And it's open to the panelists to answer that question.
I'll take that to start. We have a limited number of people that are going to go for our credential. So you have to look at the industry you're in and you're serving. And I think the way we've looked at it in the learning opportunities is it's pre-credential, earning the credential or certification, and then after. Because then there's executive education or specialty learning that can be done after. So we're looking at this not just as the check off the box, the assessment, pushing X amount of people to it, and your X might be 2,000 a year and my X might be 50 a year. It's irrelevant, because it's about that. If that's it, if that's your vision, you have processes and budget built around that. And one of the construction associations that I worked for, the majority of people that went in to take the certification exam were paid for by an employer. They would push, they wanted it, they valued it. So it was volume, and maybe, 50, 70 people a year. Someone left that employer and that next person in wasn't as keen on paying for 50 or 70 people a year. And what does that do to your department, to your certification budget if you take a chunk of it that was coming in a certain way? So there's so many things to look at, but the reasonable learning opportunities, I think, no matter if you're just a certification department or organization, you have to look at the feeder organizations pre your exam and post your exam to have products and a learning portfolio that serves the learning life cycle, the career pathway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to a little bit. It's a very important question, but I would like to challenge the premise of the question, which almost assumes that the drive for credentialing revenue and ability to deliver lifelong learning are at odds. Yeah. And I think that it's rooted in the historical approach to things. We have seen, and I have several examples of it, that learning is a growth driver. I mean, I have like 5 people that I can actually see on this kind of chat right now who run organizations where learning has actually been an amazing growth driver over the last 5 years, right? And the products that they have built are equitable, are affordable, and are actually reaching geographies and segments that the for-profit market was not able to reach, and still driving revenue. So I would almost say we can't start with saying that learning or providing learning opportunities to all candidates means it's a cost center or a hurdle. It is a revenue driver, right? It's also like the position where the credentialing body is sitting is one where it comes with a lot of kind of brand equity, but it also kind of comes with a lot of access. And to Tracy's point, not every learning product has to be kind of very high price. In some cases, it is for masses, and kind of volumes kind of pays for it, and so on. So anyway, I mean, I can give a couple of more examples, but I think we need to kind of start in the community. We need to kind of start with saying, not assuming that lifelong learning is a hurdle or a cost center. It is a growth driver, and then open up the discussion.
And can I just say, so that leads me almost to my next challenging question, where how do you truly measure long-term impact of alternate pathways? So beyond completion rates or revenue, how are we measuring what is success? How are you measuring patient care? How many patients are touched within a year? So I'm curious to hear your opinions on that.
And so for our organization, one of the things that we measure specifically, like with our learning resources, if they're successful, is the number of repeat users. How many people are coming back and engaging and they find value in the content we're providing? We've been able to put learning resources out there that are right now being consumed in, I think, 170 countries. And so through our certification, could we have had as much of a global impact as we're having with our learning resources? No, that it, somebody in a resource limited country probably wouldn't, our certifications from a price point may not even be accessible for them. But being able to provide those learning resources at low or no cost is allowing us to have that impact. So for us, that's really how we're measuring is what is our reach? What is the repeat? Are they finding value in the content that we're providing? And is it having a direct impact on patient care?
Great.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really, I feel like that's a very difficult question, because what Jasmine shared is what we have seen others organizations, try to do. And I think Intellios is at the forefront of it. So those are the metrics. Now, eventually, we want the metrics to be like real world outcomes of how people are performing on the job. Having said that, that's also very difficult to do. And these people are actually not working for the credentialing bodies or associations. So we can measure pass rates and kind of completion rates and kind of, repeat take rates. And those are the absolute right ones in that particular context. But, eventually it comes out to be like, are they actually doing their job better? So we have actually seen some organizations do pilot programs, saying, hey, we are launching this new learning program. This is going to impact this particular outcome. We don't have a capacity to track all the users that are going to go through it, but we have these three, institutional partners. Maybe it's a university or maybe it's kind of an employer, and they actually kind of work with them to run specific, control experiments to see how that's impacting. So that's a direction that it's kind of going. It's a moving target, right? You first launch it and you want to be able to see, are people using it? What's the engagement? What is the satisfaction? When you kind of get to that point, then you're like, okay, what's the outcome? And we are kind of beginning to get to that second phase where people are kind of beginning to focus more on the outcomes than just the engagement on the learning program.
And I think technology is going to help that as well. At our organization, we use a business model called the interaction field. And so we work with a lot of different organizations. So being able to share data and leverage technology to be able to see that full proficiency journey from learning to performing, to see if the learning is playing an impact, to see if the credentials that we're offering are making an impact on those who are and who aren't certified. So I'm thinking with the advancement of technology and being able to share data, we'll be able to measure that a bit more easier in the future.
Thank you. So I did get a question from an audience member. I'm just gonna read it if you forgive me. There is a lot of information for pre-certificates prior to the high stake exams and or those with high stake exams and few learning offerings. What about those of us in the learning space trying to move to micro-credentialing space, to move to the micro-credentialing space? So for example, being asked to create stackable credentials for those who currently hold the certification, and what do we do? It doesn't seem like they want the certificates want it, but they're being told to do it. So I'm going to put the question in the chat too, so you can read it. And also, please feel free to everyone to put answers, responses, your experience in the chat too. It's not I really want it open to everybody's experience. Everybody has valuable input.
And
So what-
I can start.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tracy, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. The quick comment I would have here is, does your profession or industry need a valid recognition of a certain learning journey? And that industry then can validate the need for it and the recognition that a group of people would pilot to move to a credential, a micro certificate, acknowledgement of learning. It doesn't have to move to a high stakes assessment. And I love calling things a pilot. Let's pilot a program. Let's see if we can get 100 people to earn this. And then let's assess the value. What did it create in them? So the intention is high value training, learning, modularize, organize the thoughts into competencies. So you do research on what the need is, why it needs it. You don't just do it for a business model. I think that's my opinion. You can, but it is intentional, the learning pieces of it that are then validated in whatever format. And then hopefully your pilot program says, this is great. We need more of this. There is also some industries that are moving. I've been talking to an organization that's coming out in the dermatology type of space that needs something done, and they have people pushing back. Why do we need this? We don't want this. We can't keep up. The products are changing so quickly. The vendors and the products are changing so quickly. That's a perfect case for a micro certification because you need to do something, and the value of it is like in IT. The window shelf life is very short. You're not going to build a high stakes exam that the content can't keep up with the science or the research or the process. So, Ashish.
Totally. Those are kind of really good points. I would say that to begin with, if the candidates don't want it, I mean, there is something wrong in the approach, right? What I've seen some couple of organizations do is, if your organization is not providing stackable credentials or whatever you kind of name it, I bet the the members or the professionals are already figuring that out. They're not going to wait for the credentialing body or the association to do something. And we saw two examples, one in healthcare and one in finance, where there's a big credential, everyone kind of goes through that, and afterwards they're on their own. And these two organizations saw that a lot of professionals after the credential, tend to gravitate towards this kind of one subspecialty or one field. And if you go and ask your candidates or post-exam candidates what exactly is happening, you would actually very quickly see some of those trends emerging. And if you put those stackable credentials or credential programs on top of what is already happening in the market, that's when the magic happens. So I feel like sometimes the answer is kind of out in the air, and it's better to kind of work backwards from that than, as Tracy said, like agreeing on the business model and then building a product.
Can I want to give my experience too. So, Jasmine and we work for the same organization, and we were just at a conference for family medicine physicians, and it's for our certification, it's not required for the physicians. It's not part of their board exam. It's an extra certification to demonstrate their proficiency with a tool that they could be using. So they're all wanting the education though. So it's proving that the test is valuable. That's the hard point. And I think that's kind of where the question is laying too, where proving that this certification is valuable to you along with the learning. And that can be sometimes challenging to figure out to express that value. Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Jasmine?
No, sorry. I thought you were going to go to the next
Okay.
question. No,
Okay.
I think that was
Yeah.
great. Thank
Okay.
you.
So yeah, thank you. And then the next question I have, when does maintaining rigor conflict with the need for innovating and flexibility in lifelong learning programs? So with the majority of us, there's high stakes credentialing rigor in development and how we develop. But then thinking about like lifelong learning, where does that conflict happen, or that the butting of heads, if you will, for development?
And I can share from us definitely a lesson learned with the micro-credential program that we built specifically for the audience that Lori just mentioned. These are physicians who, this is a tool. This is not required. This is a tool, but we built this program really mirroring a high stakes credential program when that's not what they need. This is a tool that they use a very small portion of their job. And though it does have a huge impact, if we would have, we built it modeling high stakes and there was no education involved in it. And there was very quickly, we realized that there was a disconnect. And so if we would have modeled the program with lifelong learning, with learning integrated in it, learning in a way where we can easily adapt, because this is a tool where technology is changing so fast, I think we would have seen more adoption, or it wouldn't have been as much resistance as we initially got with the program that we developed. So I think it's kind of going back to the question of, with that innovation there and that flexibility, is this, I think it may have been Tracy's point, is this something that's just going to have a short shelf life and the technology is going to continue changing? That may let you know, hey, a micro credential or something focused on a more of an educational based certificate versus something that's, you know, high stakes, that's not going to be rapidly changing. So I think the shelf life, the technology, I think those are some points that you consider when considering, should this be micro credentialing, more of a learning certificate versus a high stakes offering.
And I would add, you know, many of us have our systems built. You know, we update a job task analysis and our modules and our competencies every 4 or 5 years. That's when we do it, period. And that's our cycle, and that's how it's budgeted and staffed. And then we update the exam. And, you know, so what happens when something comes in that should be added? That should be a competency. And, you know, example from my background, my first credential, I'm a registered dietitian, and the world of weight loss has dramatically changed. For example, you know, you all may know people that have, you know, related the drugs, the pharmacology uses for weight loss and the side effects and, you know, and all those different things that may or may not be in the window of time when it's time to update the modules of this, you know, high stakes board certification. And it's necessary. It needs to evolve immediately. If you are the organization of truth and highest knowledge, your exam should reflect the most recent knowledge, and our rigor with our processes, however many years it takes us to update things, sometimes can't happen fast enough so that our modules and our competencies and our exam questions align with what the people should know and demonstrate knowledge of.
Tracy, can I ask you a question? So in that situation, do you think that would require updating your high stakes exam, or could that be an opportunity for a micro credential?
Both. I mean, the right answer is both. It should be both. It should be part of the high stakes exam, and it could be a specialty micro cert, you know, before exam, after exam, whatever. So the opportunity is both to do the best thing.
Yeah, actually, Tracy, what you said, I feel like that's the crux of the issue here. I think that, going back to Lori, your question, the challenge is not exactly rigor versus innovation and how do you balance and are they in conflict. It's actually more structural, that most of the systems and processes are often built around one-time exam world. And you know, now suddenly a new format emerges, micro-credential and adaptive learning or AI-driven assessment, and not the format, but in the world where changes are happening fast, like it doesn't fit, right? So then you bring in this new format, but the new format doesn't match with the old structure. But if done well, and I mean, Tracy, you have kind of several examples of it, and so does you know, Jasmine in Telios. If done well, responsibly, it can actually enhance rigor. Because now what's happening is it's allowing organizations to measure skills more frequently, more authentically, and close gap faster rather than kind of waiting for those 4 years. But the motion is different. The motion for having a rigorous high stakes exam is just different than motion for having a micro credential or kind of stackable credentials or adaptive learning pathways and so on. Anyway, yeah.
Where you're making sure that that user absorb that learning offering. And I just want to add, so what if you just have learning? And do you have to create a credential or micro credential? And I don't know about you guys, but in my mind, if you want to test it out, you can create like one or two questions. It depend, but it's also like that depends. How big is the education? What is being taught? But if you start adding questions, make it part of the norm that they see it, and then you can gradually get the buy-in from the group that you're working with. But I don't know if you all feel differently about that. If you're just a learning organization.
I love that question about, does it have to be, you know, a micro credential or, you know, certificate or whatever? And you can call it whatever you want, you know, because I've worked in organizations that really understand what certification is and others that don't. But here's the thing that we can all agree. Adults love recognition of learning that enhances their own self-esteem, credibility, competency, and recognition by families, peers, whatever. That is tested. There's research on it. The numbers of the digital badging, you know, bringing it back to the beginning, people love to validate, I did something, I achieved something, you know, whether it's a gold star certificate or whether it's something that has a micro knowledge check or assessment. Just give people pathways to enhance their career that lead all the way to high stakes certification and then renewal. You know, let's challenge adults to really maintain competency, not just turn in paperwork, that they do CEUs. You know, the whole butts in seats versus competency-based education is a whole nother great topic. But does it have to be a micro cert or a credential? No, but get the knowledge to your learners. That's your audience that you're serving. And it may mean a split in a department or staffing, but evolve. Let's be here to evolve. You know, let's evolve together. Let's not assume we have the same staffing doing the same thing with the same program we've done for 50 years.
And Lori, to build on that a bit, so before coming into the testing space, as I was sharing, my background was in higher education. And previously in higher education was just focused on deliver the learning. But the institution I was working for specifically, and the trend in most higher education is the accrediting organizations are asking for that assessment piece to verify that what is being taught, they're retaining it, they're going to be able to apply it. So to your point, Lori, the assessment part of it doesn't have to be cumbersome. It doesn't have to be exactly what you're doing for your high stakes exams, but some aspect of assessing that they're retaining the knowledge, they can synthesize the information and apply it is an important component of it.
It's awesome. I want to keep talking, but I'm looking at the time. We're almost out of time. I just want to thank you, the panelists, for your honesty and insight, and thank you for joining the conversation, as well as sharing your perspectives. Belinda just put in the next virtual session in the chat, so please, everyone, be on the lookout for that. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.